Hello, and thank you for joining me again today. Today we're going to pick up in Proverbs chapter 2, right where we left off last time. Last time we looked at the first 9 verses of Proverbs chapter 2, and if you recall, in those verses Solomon really extols the virtues of seeking wisdom and having wisdom, telling us that we ought to seek it like we would treasure or wealth in this life, and that wisdom will protect us and defend against the things that would try to harm us or take us down. Wisdom and understanding are a great defense. In fact, Solomon, in another book in Ecclesiastes, wrote that money is a defense, but wisdom is also a defense. And the excellency of wisdom is that wisdom can give life to those that have it. Money has limits. It can only go so far. Wisdom will be a great defense against Satan and against the deceptions that are in this world. So we're going to pick up here in Proverbs chapter number 2, beginning in verse number 10. And as we read through the remainder of the chapter, we'll see that Solomon is telling us that wisdom will protect us against two very particular types of people: the wicked man and the strange woman. And we'll see that here, and we'll get into what those are here as we go through. But let's begin in Proverbs chapter 2 and verse 10. The Bible says, "When wisdom entereth into thine heart, and knowledge is pleasant unto thy soul, discretion shall preserve thee, understanding shall keep thee, to deliver thee from the way of the evil man, from the man that speaketh froward things, who leave the paths of uprightness to walk in the ways of darkness, who rejoice to do evil, and delight in the frowardness of the wicked, whose ways are crooked, and they froward in their paths, to deliver thee from the strange woman, even from the stranger which flattereth with her words, which forsaketh the guide of her youth, and forgetteth the covenant of her God. For her house inclineth unto death, and her paths unto the dead. None that go unto her return again, neither take they hold of the paths of life, that thou mayest walk in the way of good men, and keep the paths of the righteous. For the upright shall dwell in the land, and the perfect shall remain in it, but the wicked shall be cut off from the earth, and the transgressors shall be rooted out of it." And we've seen before, Solomon has mentioned very clearly how that those with whom we associate, those with whom we choose to spend our time and make our closest acquaintances, have a huge impact on our life. And here Solomon is encouraging his son to walk in uprightness, but also walk with good men, those who are going to encourage and strengthen and help him to walk the paths of righteousness as opposed to wickedness. But wisdom is what it is. It's the key to helping us find those good people that we can have in our lives and protect us from those who would harm us or who would do evil and draw us into their evil. So Solomon says here, "When wisdom entereth into thine heart, and knowledge is pleasant unto thy soul, discretion shall preserve thee, understanding shall keep thee." So again, he's reminding us, wisdom and understanding are the defenses against wicked people. They are what will give to us the knowledge that we need and the practical steps to take to keep us from following in the pathway of wicked people, that will protect us. Those who do what is right, you will find that when you do the right thing, it's a repellent to those who would want to do wrong. And when we see those who are doing wrong and we want to do right, they are a repellent against those who would want to do the right thing. So wisdom is what gives us the discernment to understand that. He says, "When wisdom entereth into thine heart, and knowledge is pleasant unto thy soul, discretion shall preserve thee." And there it is. We have to have the right attitude towards knowledge and wisdom to make God's knowledge and God's wisdom what is pleasant to us, or what it is we enjoy, the thing that we exalt in our life. And then discretion shall preserve thee. What is discretion? It's the ability to discern between what is good and what is bad. Not always between what is right and wrong, but what is good. What is good? Sometimes things look good, but they're really not very good for us. So it's being able to determine what is good. Sometimes it's easy to spot what is wicked, but hard to discern out of all the things that are not necessarily wicked, what is good and what is best. So discretion helps us do that. Discretion sometimes is sacrificing something that seems good for something that is better. That's what discretion is. And so Solomon's saying, when you have that desire for wisdom and it enters into you and it's pleasant to you, you don't just have it, but it's pleasant to you, then discretion shall be what preserves you or protects you, and understanding shall keep you or defend you. Verse 12, to deliver thee from the way of the evil man, from the man that speaketh froward things, who leave the paths of uprightness, to walk in the ways of darkness. To deliver thee from the evil man. The evil man, the word evil in the Bible, we often think of that as being extremely wicked, and it is, but the word evil in the Bible means harmful or that which is harmful to another or to oneself. The Bible said, I just read in Isaiah today, God said, I create evil. And what God was talking about in that passage is when harm was coming to Israel in the sense of the destruction of the nation and their captivity, that was coming from God. It wasn't that God was creating wickedness. It was that God was the one that was putting in place the kings of the world that would punish Israel and therefore bring harm to the nation. That's what he meant. He didn't mean wickedness, he meant harm. And that's what they're saying here. There is a pathway that leads us along with people who don't really care whether or not we're harmed in that pathway. And there are pathways we can walk in this life that will bring evil upon us or harm to us, physically sometimes, emotionally many times, and especially spiritually. And one of the ways in which we know that pathway is, it says in verse 13, who leave the paths of uprightness to walk in the ways of darkness. Isn't it interesting that those who would do wrong and those that would do harm often want to do so in the darkness of night, or at least outside the observation of others? I have this philosophy and I have this idea that when people are trying to hide away their actions or keep them hidden from others, there's definitely something wrong going on there. Now, that's not to say that people don't like to have surprise parties or surprise people with parties. I understand sometimes we do things to surprise people, but we always bring that to light at some point, like a surprise party or surprise gift, okay? I go out shopping for my wife's birthday or for Christmas or something. Okay, I might want to keep that hidden from her to a point and then bring it to light. But those who would do wickedness and harm to others don't want their actions to be brought to light, but will walk in the paths of darkness. They'll keep secrets from others, and they won't want others to see what's going on. They'll insist on a certain level of privacy that cuts people out of their lives from things that could and should be out in the open. It's especially true with children. If children are trying to hide things from their parents really need to question what it is that's going on that they do not want the parent to see or hear or know. I do believe in respect and I do believe in giving a certain level of privacy, but I also believe when someone's trying purposefully to hide something from someone else, there's something going on there. That's the idea of froward. The idea of froward is you cannot see around the bend in the path. Okay, there's a man that speaks froward things. That means he talks in a way that's so deceptive and crooked that you can't really make out exactly what's going on. He'll tell you, oh, you'll find out, or you'll see, or, well, we'll do this and you'll see it'll work out. That is froward speech. It's keeping the bend in the path, what's beyond the bend in the path, hidden from you so that you can't see it clearly. That's what the word froward means. Verse 14, who rejoice to do evil and delight in the frowardness of the wicked, whose ways are crooked. See, there's that idea again. They're not very straight, not very plain, and they froward in their paths. So we can recognize evil men as those that would harm others who like to walk in darkness, or at least keep their decisions hidden from others, who rejoice in harm or evil and then delight in crookedness and hiding the end of the path from those around them. And wisdom when it comes into us is a defense against that. When you see somebody who is purposefully being deceptive in their speech, or not revealing things in their speech, or not being very open with their speech about what's going on, or not very, very open about the path that they're on, you have to question why. And wisdom steps in and waves a red flag and says, look, this person right here is someone you may very well have to consider avoiding because they're not being very open with you. They're not showing you the way that you're going to walk. They're keeping it hidden. So be very, very careful of that type of person. Wisdom will protect you from that. The next type of person is found in verse 16. To deliver thee from the strange woman, even from the stranger which flattereth with her words. And there's going to be a description in verse 17, which forsaketh the guide of her youth, and forgetteth the covenant of her God. Now the strange woman shows up many times in Proverbs, especially in the first 7 chapters of the book of Proverbs. And wisdom, I said this before, wisdom is often personified or described by Solomon as a woman that you would want to spend the rest of your life with, or a close relative that has instructed and taught you and brought you up, someone that you would trust completely. That is what wisdom is, how it's defined by Solomon. Now, the strange woman is the opposite of wisdom. The strange woman can be seen as one of two things. It can be seen either as a philosophy or a way of thinking that is exactly the opposite of wisdom. Okay, like it says here, that pulls you away from God. Okay, wisdom draws you to God. The strange woman draws you away from God. Verse 17, she forsakes the guide of her youth and forgets the covenant of her God. But it's also seen as a foreigner, or someone whose ways are completely different from the ways that God would want you to walk. The strange woman is described, especially as we look and we see in Proverbs chapters 6 and 7, as one who is seductive, who tries to draw you after her by the way she looks and the way she acts and by her charm, because there's no real substance there. It's all glamour, it's all glitter, it all looks good, but inside it's rotten and destructive. That's how the strange woman is described. So we see it as that which pulls us away from God by way of thinking and philosophy, but also a foreigner is someone who has very different ideas about God. And what wisdom is saying is, listen, I'm waving a red flag showing you, protect yourself from these types of people. The evil man, the one who would do harm to himself and others, and the strange woman, the one who will pull you away from God and leave you desolate, desperate, destitute, because that's what the strange woman does. So again, let's begin in verse 16. To deliver thee from the strange woman, even from the stranger which flattereth with her words, which forsaketh the guide of her youth, and forgetteth the covenant of her God. Those who would come to you and say that what you have learned about Christianity or Christianity as a whole is not true or is not worth living, that is the strange woman philosophy. Okay? Those with whom we would associate, especially as close associates in our lives and bring into our lives, not saying that we don't have friends. I'm talking about those who we walk lockstep with in our lives, those who we walk the same pathway in our lives, who are contrary to God and have different ideas about God. That is the strange woman. That is not to say that we should not be trying to help people find God or influence people toward God or even have some acquaintances in our life that we're trying to influence for the Lord. But when it comes to walking in tandem together, walking the pathway of life together, the strange woman, the one who would pull us away from God, is the one to be avoided. As a Christian, we should look to, if we're a single Christian and we're looking to the future, to the day that maybe we're married, we should be looking for someone who would draw us closer to God, not someone who is apathetic toward God or doesn't care about God or who would draw us away from God. Okay? If we're going to get into business with somebody or we're going to be very closely associated with somebody, we should be looking for someone who puts God first and who seeks to honor and please the Lord first, and not someone who would make us forget about what it is God has taught us or draw us away from the Lord. I mean, Corinthians tells us the same thing. Be ye not unequally yoked together with non-believers. Okay? We shouldn't be getting that close with unbelievers that they pull us away from God. Now, verse 18 tells us why. It tells us the result. It says, for her house inclineth unto death, and her paths unto the dead. None that go unto her return again, neither take they hold of the paths of life. So he's telling us here, when we start walking down that philosophy that leads us away from God, or we start associating with people who are drawing us away from God, the end expectation is that we will end up upon a path from which we will never return. And it happens to so many people. They start moving close to the Lord. They start growing close to the Lord, even sometimes good Christians who walk with the Lord. But into their life comes somebody who has no regard for God and who has, or maybe someone who was a Christian or claimed to be a Christian at one time, who has forgotten, it says here, forgetteth the covenant of God, forgets the promises of God, forgets or doesn't want to walk in the way of the Lord. And for some reason, they draw us down rather than we drawing them up. And the reason is because their path is a different path. Listen, if you get on a path that takes you away from God, you cannot expect to find God at the end of that path. It's like if I get on the road headed to Chicago, I shouldn't be surprised when I get there. I mean, it's just the way it works. If I get on a road that's headed to LA, I shouldn't be surprised when I end up in LA. And if I get on a road that's taking me away from God, I shouldn't be surprised when I get to the end of it and find out that I'm far from God. That's just the way life is. And so wisdom will protect us from that. When we have God's wisdom in our life and it is in our hearts and it's pleasant to us, it will draw us to God and protect us. It will throw up red flags when we start finding people in our lives or seeing people in our lives that follow the path of the evil man or the path of the strange woman. Let's finish off with the last 3 verses here. It goes on again, if we remind us what he said at the beginning, when wisdom entereth into thine heart, and knowledge is pleasant unto thy soul. He said in verse 20, it says, discretion shall keep thee, understanding shall preserve thee. Verse 20, that thou mayest walk in the way of good men, and keep the paths of righteousness. For the upright shall dwell in the land, and the perfect shall remain in it. But the wicked shall be cut off from the earth, and the transgressors shall be rooted out of it. And God reminds us once again, that path that we're on, whether it's a path of wickedness or righteousness, is going to be where we end up. Say, well, I'm going down this path right now because my friends are going that way, and it hasn't affected me yet. Well, a path can be a long way, but the end of the path is still going to happen if you stay on that path. It may take some time, it may take months, it may take years, but if you remain on a path, that is where you're going to end up. So God says, get on the path of righteousness, stay off the path of wickedness, and wisdom will give us the discretion to be able to understand when we're headed on that right path or headed toward the wrong path. Wisdom will raise the red flag and say, this path is not the right path to be on. This path is the right path to be on. But the question is, do we know God's wisdom so that we can make that choice? When wisdom entereth into thine heart, and knowledge is pleasant unto thy soul, discretion shall preserve thee, understanding shall keep thee. So let us apply our hearts to know God's wisdom and then use it in our life. And that may mean setting boundaries. That will mean, that doesn't may, it will mean setting boundaries and saying to some people, I'm not crossing that path. I'm not going that way. I mean, I love you. I want the best for you, but I can't walk that path with you because that path is the wrong path to walk. Well, God bless you. Again, I hope it's been a blessing to you. And I hope to see you all again very, very soon. Take care.